If you scrolled through my camera roll and saw the snapshots of us together, you'd swear I was living the ultimate New York City fairy tale. You'd see the private rooftop dinners overlooking the glowing skyline of Midtown, the spontaneous weekend, getaways to a secluded estate in the Hamptons, where the salt air smells like old money, and those heavy, sleek black gift boxes that arrived at my door like clockwork. They always came with a handwritten note in that sharp, confident cursive of his. He didn't just buy me jewelry, he bought me status. He called me his good girl. He told me I was his escape from the grind, his little secret corner of the world where he could finally breathe. For 10 months, I believed every syllable of the script he wrote for us. I was Clara, the rising creative who had managed to snag the heart of one of the city's most untouchable bachelors. But exactly 14 days ago, the fairy tale didn't just end, it imploded. I didn't just find out he was seeing someone else. I discovered the soul-crushing truth that I wasn't his girlfriend. I wasn't his partner. I was the other woman. The side piece. The secret tucked away in a luxury high-rise while his real life played out in a townhouse on the Upper East Side. And right now, if you saw us together, you'd think nothing had changed. I'm still smiling that sweet, disarming smile. I'm still hitting send on those flirty, suggestive good morning texts that I know make his heart race during his morning commute. I'm still letting him pull me into his lap, smelling that expensive mahogany-scented cologne, acting like his good girl. All while I methodically dismantle his entire world, piece by piece, brick by brick. Don't look away. Stick around, because this is a masterclass in what happens when a man thinks he can play with high-octane fire and somehow come out without a single singe. He thinks he's the predator, but he's about to find out he's been inviting the hunter into his bed every single night. The text that changed everything didn't come with a warning. It didn't arrive during business hours or while I was prepared for a fight. It hit my phone at 11:47 p.m. on a completely unremarkable Tuesday. I was scrolled through Pinterest, half asleep, when the screen lit up the dark room. It was from a scrubbed or unknown number. No name, no intro, just a single screenshot and 4 words that felt like a physical blow to the stomach. You deserve to know. My heart did a slow, sickening somersault before I even tapped the image. I think, deep down, the human intuition knows when a bomb is about to go off. I opened the photo, and there he was, Julian Vance. Julian is 42, a high-powered partner at one of the most prestigious, too-big-to-fail investment firms in Manhattan. He's the kind of man who walks into a room and the oxygen seems to shift in his direction. For nearly a year, this man had spoiled me rotten. He'd paid for my Pilates memberships, my designer bags, and the very lease on the apartment I was sitting in. Except in this photo, he wasn't the doting boyfriend I knew. He was at a high-society charity gala, the kind that costs 10 grand just to sit at a table. His arm was wrapped firmly around a stunning, elegant brunette in a floor-length crimson gown. She looked like she belonged on the cover of Vogue. In front of them stood 2 kids, a boy and a girl, both sporting that private school polish. The caption on the woman's Instagram post was the final nail in the coffin. 14 years with my best friend, grateful every single day for the life we've built. My hands started shaking so violently, I nearly sent my phone flying across the hardwood floor. I had to grip the edge of my nightstand just to stay upright. I zoomed in on the photo, praying it was a mistake, a cousin, a lookalike. It wasn't. It was the same Patek Philippe watch I'd helped him pick out during our business trip to Zurich, the one he said was a reward for a big closing. It was the same charming, lopsided half-smile he gave me every time he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and told me I was different from any woman he'd ever met. I wasn't different. I was a cliché. I was the mistress in the downtown apartment, the cliché side story to his main character life. I sat there on the edge of the California king bed he'd paid for, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sparkling lights of the city. Usually, that view made me feel like I'd conquered the world. Tonight, it made me feel like I was trapped in a glass cage. Everything fractured in an instant. First came the rage, a hot, searing heat that started in my chest and moved to my throat. Then the humiliation, the realization that every doorman in this building probably knew what I was. But underneath the heartbreak, something much colder and much more dangerous started to crystallize. It was a low, steady whisper in the back of my mind that said, he doesn't get to walk away from this clean. He doesn't get to have the perfect family and the perfect secret without paying the toll. I cried that night. Don't get me wrong. I'm human. I sobbed until my eyes were swollen shut, burying my face into a $400 silk pillowcase that he'd bought me because only the best for my girl. I almost grabbed my phone a dozen times to scream at him via text, to send him the screenshot and tell him to go to hell. I wanted that immediate, explosive release of a confrontation. But as the sun began to peek over the East River, I wiped my face and looked at my reflection in the darkened glass. I didn't want a temporary explosion. I wanted a total eclipse. I made a choice right then and there. I wouldn't be the crazy ex who sent a few mean texts and got blocked. I would become the absolute perfect, sweet, devoted, and submissive other woman he thought he'd successfully manipulated. I would play the role of his dreams while I quietly laid the gunpowder under every single pillar of his life. The next morning, the performance began. I didn't wake up and send a breakup text. Instead, I took a photo. I posed in his favorite black lace lingerie set, making sure my hair looked perfectly tousled and my expression was just the right amount of longing. I sent it with a caption that made my skin crawl to type. Missing you already, baby. Hurry back from your business trip. I have a surprise for you. The reply came in less than 2 minutes. He was probably sitting at a mahogany conference table, or maybe at breakfast with his best friend, Alina. That's my good girl, he wrote. I'll be over tonight to claim that surprise. I stared at the screen and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a person who just saw their target walk right into the crosshairs. My stomach turned with a mix of genuine physical revulsion and a lingering, sick attachment. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't kill the love instantly. It just poisons it. Part of me still remembered the way he'd hold me after a long day, the way he actually seemed to listen when I talked about my goals of launching a boutique creative agency. He made me feel seen in a city that usually treats people like ghosts. But the smarter, harder part of me, the part that was now fully awake, was already drafting a mental burn list. Discovery number 1, his wife Alina. I did my homework. She wasn't just some trophy wife. She was the daughter of a retired hedge fund titan, a man whose name is whispered in hushed tones on Wall Street. Their wealth wasn't just rich, it was dynasty money. It was old, ironclad, and protected by the kind of lawyers who make problems disappear. Julian hadn't just cheated on a spouse, he was cheating on the very hand that fed his career. If the dynasty found out he was playing house with a 20-something in a Chelsea high-rise, his professional life wouldn't just stall, it would be deleted. Discovery number 2, the shadow phone. I'd noticed it once months ago. He'd left his briefcase cracked open while he was in the shower, and a second, sleek burner phone had vibrated. At the time, I'd convinced myself it was just for high-level secure trades. Now I knew it was his lifeline to his lies. That phone was his vulnerability. That evening, when Julian showed up at my door, he looked every bit the exhausted executive. He smelled like expensive scotch and the recycled air of a first-class cabin. I didn't flinch. I played my role to perfection. I met him at the door wearing nothing but one of his white button-down shirts, the sleeves rolled up, looking like the picture of domestic bliss he wanted. I kissed him with a hunger that he mistook for passion. I let him lift me onto the marble kitchen island, his hands gripping my waist the way he always did when he wanted to feel in control. "You're so good to me, Clara," he growled against the skin of my neck. Then he used the nickname he preferred when we were out in public, a layer of protection just in case someone overheard. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have this place to come home to. I let out a soft, rehearsed moan, running my fingers through his thick, graying hair. I leaned into his ear and whispered, "You're never going to have to find out, Julian. I'm right here." As I said it, I was looking past his shoulder at his jacket draped over the chair. I was mentally recording the passcode he'd typed into his primary phone just minutes earlier when he thought I was distracted by the wine I was pouring. 1923. I realized with a jolt of cold amusement that it was his wife's birth year and month. How typical. Men like Julian aren't just liars, they're lazy. They think they're too smart to get caught, so they stop trying to be clever. The actual revenge didn't start with a big gotcha moment. Those are for movies. Real-life ruin is a slow burn. It started with tiny, surgical moves that felt almost like a game of romantic chess. While he was in the shower the next morning, singing some classic rock tune like he didn't have a care in the world, I was at his work laptop. I didn't do anything sloppy. I didn't delete files or change passwords. I just observed. I copied client lists, quarterly projections, and specifically, notes on a massive merger and acquisition deal that was set to close in 6 weeks. This deal was his golden ticket. If it went through, Julian would be named managing partner. If it failed, or if there was even a hint of a scandal during the vetting process, he'd be the fall guy. I set up a series of encrypted, anonymous email accounts. I started taking high-resolution photos of his physical documents, memos, handwritten notes about offshore accounts, and aggressive tax optimization, strategies that looked a little too close to the line of legality. But the real masterpiece was the emotional labor. I stayed the good girl. I was low maintenance. I never asked, "Where are you?" or "Why didn't you call?" I became his sanctuary. I sent him voice notes during his high-stress meetings, telling him I'd have a cold drink and a warm bath waiting for him. I stroked his ego until it was so inflated he felt invincible. Every time he walked out of my apartment, I felt the sheer weight of the double life I was leading. I felt a twinge of guilt for Alina, a woman I'd never met but whose life was being treated like a footnote. I felt the adrenaline of the risk, but mostly, I felt the hunger. I wanted to see the look on his face when the floor finally fell out from under him. 2 weeks into my new career, as a double agent, I decided it was time to turn up the heat. I needed to see if he'd notice a small leak in his boat. I sent an anonymous tip to a hungry junior analyst at his firm. It wasn't a smoking gun, just a suggestion to look into potential irregularities and conflict of interest regarding a specific subcontractor on the big merger. It was just enough to trigger a few internal emails, just enough to make people start whispering in the break room. Then I took it a step further. I'd snapped a photo of some sensitive, eyes-only, emails Julian had foolishly left open on my counter while he was busy claiming his surprise. I redacted the names of the innocent parties, but kept Julian's signature and the most damning parts of the text. I sent these to a high-traffic financial blogger who thrives on Wall Street drama. But the most satisfying part of the week was finding Alina on social media. I didn't use my real account, obviously. I found her through a web of mutual professional connections. I didn't reach out, I just studied her. I looked at her posts about her charity work for underprivileged kids. I saw her photos from their vow renewal 3 years ago. She was smart, she was high society, and she clearly valued her family's legacy above all else. She was exactly the kind of woman who would go scorched earth if she found out her husband was using her father's money to fund a love nest in Chelsea. One night, Julian was a mess. The merger was hitting some unexpected turbulence, mostly because of the questions my little tips had started raising. He drank nearly half a bottle of my best bourbon and passed out on my velvet sofa, still in his suit. I didn't sleep. I took his shadow phone, the one he thought was his little secret. I used his thumb while he was in a drunken stupor to unlock it. I found the messages. They weren't just to me. There were others. Not current, but a history of good girls stretching back years. I didn't cry this time. I felt a cold, clinical satisfaction. I took his flirty, graphic messages to me, the ones that proved he was paying my rent and buying me jewelry with what I suspected were company-reimbursed funds, and I forwarded them to a secure cloud drive. Then, I sent them to his own work email, set on a delay send for a time when he'd be in the middle of a partner meeting. I crawled onto the sofa next to him, resting my head on his chest. I could hear his heart beating, steady, arrogant, unsuspecting. My own heart was racing like a getaway car. He stirred slightly, pulling me closer in his sleep. "You're the only one who really gets me, baby," he mumbled, his breath smelling of bourbon and lies. I kissed his jawline, the stubble scratching my lips, and I whispered back into the darkness. "I get you more than you'll ever know, Julian. I've got you exactly where I want you." The tension in the air now is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Every time Julian's phone rings, he jumps. He's becoming paranoid, but he doesn't know where the threat is coming from. He thinks it's a rival at the firm. He thinks someone is trying to snake his promotion. He hasn't for a single second suspected the girl in the lace lingerie. Last Wednesday, I almost blew it. I was in the middle of photographing a ledger he'd brought home, something he should have never taken out of the office, when his work phone buzzed on the nightstand. He was walking back from the kitchen with 2 glasses of water. I had maybe 3 seconds. I shoved the phone into his jacket pocket and pivoted just as he entered the bedroom. He stopped, his eyes narrowing. He's a partner at a top-tier firm for a reason. He's trained to spot inconsistencies. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't stammer. I didn't blush. I just gave him that shy, vulnerable look that always makes him feel like a big, strong protector. I dropped to my knees on the carpet in front of him, resting my hands on his thighs. "I'm just stressed, Julian. I've been thinking about how much I'm going to miss you when you're on that trip next week." Distraction, successful. The suspicion vanished from his eyes, replaced by that familiar predatory hunger. He forgot all about the phone. He forgot about the ledger. But after he left, I was shaking so hard I had to sit on the floor for 20 minutes. It was a mix of pure terror and a high-octane adrenaline rush I've never felt before. For a split second, I thought about stopping. I thought about just packing a bag, changing my name, and disappearing into the Midwest. Then I remembered the way he talked about his kids, how he'd miss their soccer games to come spend the night with me, then tell his wife he was trapped at the office. I remembered that I was just one in a long line of secrets. The rage came back, colder and harder than before. I'm in too deep now to turn back. I've already started planting the final seeds. I've reached out to his biggest client, a very traditional, very family values office that manages the wealth of a European royal-adjacent family. They don't do business with scandal. They don't do business with men who lack integrity. I've sent a few carefully worded, anonymous LinkedIn messages to their head of compliance, just enough to make them start an audit of Julian's accounts. The fuse is lit, the gunpowder is packed, and Julian, he's still calling me his good girl, completely unaware that the girl he bought and paid for is about to be the one who sends his entire empire into the abyss. The thing about men like Julian is that they aren't just arrogant, they're predictable. They operate on a frequency of absolute entitlement. He truly believes that because he's provided me with a high-end zip code and a few sparkling trinkets, I've become an extension of his furniture, something beautiful to look at, but ultimately inanimate. He has no idea that while he's dreaming of his next promotion, I'm busy playing Ghost in the Machine. I've taken the next step in his professional execution. It started small, surgical, really. I've begun transferring tiny, almost imperceptible amounts from one of his discretionary, slush fund accounts into a burner account I opened under a fake name. I'm talking about amounts that look like rounding errors or minor travel expenses. Not enough for a man of his wealth to notice on a Tuesday afternoon, but just enough to create a digital breadcrumb trail. To a forensic accountant, it won't look like a mistress taking her cut. If I time this right, it's going to look like a high-level executive funneling company funds into an offshore shell. It's a trail that leads to a cliff, and I'm the one gently nudging him toward the edge. Yesterday, the game changed. Yesterday, he told me he loved me for the first time. We were draped across the silk sheets of my bed, the neon pulse of the Manhattan skyline glittering 30 floors below us like a million unblinking eyes. The room was silent, save for the hum of the climate control and the distant siren of an ambulance on the street. He was tracing the curve of my hip with his thumb, his touch light and possessive. Then, he leaned in and said it so quietly, so earnestly, that for one terrifying second, I almost let myself believe him. "I love you, Clara," he whispered. "You're the only real life I have left, the only part of my world that feels honest." I didn't pull away. I didn't scream, "Liar!" into his face, though every fiber of my being was vibrating with the urge to do it. Instead, I pulled him closer and kissed him deeply, a desperate, lingering kiss that was designed to hide the fact that my eyes were welling up with hot, stinging tears. Those weren't tears of joy. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. Tears of grief for the girl I used to be, the one who would have melted at those words just 3 weeks ago. Tears of a dark, twisted satisfaction because I knew those 3 words were the final nail in his coffin. Because here's the most messed up part of this entire situation. I love him too. In the most toxic, shattered way possible, I love the version of Julian that I thought existed. I love the man who brought me soup when I was sick and the man who made me feel like the center of the universe. But I absolutely loathe the man who made me a secret. I hate the man who lies to his children while he's lying in my bed. And very soon, both versions of him, the hero and the villain, are going to burn in the same fire. This story is far from over. If you walked into my apartment right now, you'd see a happy couple. I still pick up the phone on the first ring when he calls. I still moan his name when he takes me to bed. I still let him believe he owns every square inch of my soul. But every single day, I get one step closer to the final move. This isn't just about a breakup, it's about a total systemic collapse. I'm timing everything for the worst possible moment of his life, the week of his partnership vote. I want him to be standing at the peak of his mountain, reaching for the crown, right as I pull the mountain out from under his feet. I want Alina to see exactly what kind of man she's been grateful for 14 years. I want his firm to see the integrity of their star partner. I want Julian Vance to be left with nothing but the smoking, charred ruins of the double life he thought he was clever enough to keep forever. I was tricked into being the other woman. I was cast in a role I never auditioned for, but now I'm the director. I'm the architect of his ruin. And the scariest part, the part that keeps me awake at night staring at the ceiling, is that I've never felt more powerful in my entire life. The words, "I love you," should have tasted like honey. They should have been the soundtrack to my dreams. Instead, they landed like shards of ice sliding down my spine. As we lay there, the city lights twinkling like distant stars that didn't give a damn about my shattered heart, Julian continued to trace those lazy, intimate circles on my skin. His voice was low, gravelly, and full of a fake sincerity that made my skin crawl. "You're my real life, Clara, everything else. The firm, the meetings, the social obligations. It's all just noise. This is the only part that feels like the truth." I kissed him again so he wouldn't see the storm brewing in my eyes. My lips moved against his with a practiced, hungry rhythm while my mind whispered darker, sharper truths. I loved you too, Julian. I loved the lie. But I hate the truth more. And soon, you're going to feel exactly what I felt when that screenshot tore my world apart. I pulled back just an inch, flashing that soft, adoring, slightly shy smile that I knew he couldn't resist. It was the smile that made him feel like a god. "I love you too, baby," I whispered back, my voice barely audible. "More than you could ever possibly know." The guilt hit me like a physical wave the moment the words left my mouth. It was sharp and nauseating. It wasn't just guilt for his wife, Alina, or for the kids who had no idea their father was a fraud. It was guilt for the version of myself I was systematically killing off. The girl who believed in the magic of New York. The girl who thought expensive steak dinners and spontaneous trips to the Hamptons were signs of a deep connection. That girl was fatting into a ghost, replaced by someone colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. But as I felt him relax, thinking he'd successfully secured my loyalty with a few cheap words, the hunger returned. God, the hunger for justice felt so much better than the pain of the betrayal. The next morning, I was awake long before the sun hit the skyscrapers. Julian was still dead to the world, his breathing heavy and rhythmic, one arm thrown possessively across my waist even in his sleep. It was a gesture of ownership, not affection. I propped myself up on one elbow and just studied him. I looked at the faint lines starting to etch themselves around his eyes, the result of a decade of high-stakes stress. I looked at the expensive, precision-cut hair that cost more than most people's car payments. I looked at that jawline, the one that clenched whenever a deal went sideways or whenever he had to defend his ego. In the soft, gray light of the early morning, he looked almost peaceful. He looked like a man who didn't have a single secret in the world. He looked like a man who was safe. He has no idea that the woman lying next to him is the most dangerous person in his life. He thinks he's sleeping next to a good girl. He's actually sleeping next to a countdown clock. I quietly slipped out from under his arm, my feet hitting the cold floor without a sound. I reached for his phone on the nightstand. My thumb hovered over the screen. 1923. Click, I was in. And as I scrolled through his recent calls, noticing a 4-minute conversation with a property manager at 10:00 p.m. last night, I realized the rabbit hole went even deeper than I thought. Julian wasn't just hiding me. He was hiding a whole lot more, and I'm going to find every single bit of it. I waited until I heard the rhythmic, heavy breathing of a man who truly believed he was the master of his universe. Slowly, with the precision of a diamond thief, I gently slipped out from under Julian's heavy arm. I padded across the cold, polished hardwood floors of the kitchen, the silence of the apartment feeling heavy, almost expectant. While the high-end espresso machine hummed and hissed, prepping my caffeine for the morning's work, I went through the routine that had become my new religion. I reached into his discarded blazer and pulled out the shadow phone. It was locked, of course, a sleek black piece of hardware designed to keep his secrets buried in a digital grave. But Julian is a creature of habit, and his arrogance is his biggest blind spot. I tapped in the code, 1923, Alina's birthday. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of using his wife's birth year as the key to his cheating phone made my blood simmer in my veins. It was more than a password. It was a slap in the face to every woman in his life. I spent the next 20 minutes like a ghost in his machine. I forwarded 3 more entire threads of conversation, filthy, flirty messages, late-night hotel booking confirmations from his business trips to Miami, and even a voice note I'd sent him last month. In that recording, I was moaning his name, sounding exactly like the obsessed, good girl he wanted me to be. I sent everything to a fresh, anonymous Gmail account I'd set up on a burner laptop. These were small moves. Individually, they were deniable. But together, each one was another brick in the high, windowless wall I was building around his life. When he finally stirred and called my name from the bedroom, I was ready. I walked back in with 2 mugs of fresh coffee and a warm, practiced smile. Wearing nothing but one of his crisp, white $300 button-down shirts. "You really spoil me, Clara," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep as he pulled me on top of him. He looked at me with a gaze that I used to think was love, but I now recognized as simple satisfaction, the way a man looks at a well-maintained sports car. "No, Julian," I whispered, leaning down to trail a row of soft, lingering kisses along his neck. "You're the one who spoils me. I just want to make your life as easy as possible." He let out a groan of pure pleasure, closing his eyes and believing every single syllable. That's the truly sick part of this whole mistress dynamic. He genuinely believed I existed solely for his comfort, his ego, and his release. And as long as he stayed wrapped in that delusion, I had unlimited, VIP access to the vault of his life. The revenge didn't stay digital for long. It moved from the screen to the real world faster than I'd even planned. I started playing a game I like to call the accidental expert. I began showing up, intellectually at least, in places I shouldn't know anything about. I'd be casual, almost bored, as I dropped little bombs into our conversations. I was scrolling through some food blogs, and I heard that new Italian spot on 57th, the one your firm uses for those big client dinners, is supposedly losing its edge. Maybe we should go check it out, see if the hype is dead. I'd say it with total innocence, my fingers lazily running through his hair. He'd just laugh, completely oblivious. "How do you always know these things, Clara? You're too good. You're like my own little secret weapon." I was too good. I was a predator. I was reading every single email he left open on the kitchen island while he was in the shower. I was memorizing the names of the managing partners. I was learning which of his colleagues actually respected him and which ones were sharpening their knives, just waiting for a man of Julian's stature to trip over his own ego. One afternoon, I decided to push the envelope. I created a fake LinkedIn profile, professional, high-level, perfectly curated with a headshot of a woman who looked like she belonged in a boardroom. I used this persona to reach out to Julian's biggest whale, a conservative family office run by a man named Arthur, who loved to brag in the Wall Street Journal about traditional American values and character-based investing. I sent a polite, networking-heavy message with a subtle, poison-tipped barb buried in the middle. I've heard incredible things about the deals Vance is putting together lately. Although, in these circles, I've also heard some personal rumors that might be worth verifying before you commit any more capital to the next round. I didn't expect a reply. I didn't need one. The seed was planted in the one place Julian couldn't reach, the mind of his most important client. That same night, Julian came over looking like he'd been through a war zone. His tie was loosened, his face was pale, and he went straight for the heavy crystal decanter of bourbon. "Work is absolutely killing me, baby," he sighed, collapsing onto the sofa. "This partnership vote is 6 weeks out, and I feel like I'm walking through a minefield. One wrong move, one bad rumor, and the whole thing goes up in smoke." I played the role of the perfect, supportive mistress to a T. I massaged his shoulders, kneading the tension out of his muscles. I let him vent for 2 hours, and when he was finally drained, I started asking gentle questions. Questions about the upcoming board meetings. Questions about the weak points in the merger deal. Questions about which partner was currently gunning for his office. Every word he gave me wasn't just a confidence, it was ammunition. I was loading the gun with the very bullets he provided. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a toll. After he'd finally leave to go back to his real life, I'd lock the door and sit on the floor of my walk-in shower, letting the water pelt me until it ran freezing cold. I hated that I still craved his touch. I hated the twisted, trauma-bonded attachment that made me check my phone for his "I'm home safe" text even while I was drafting his professional obituary. Fear and excitement were so tangled up in my chest, I couldn't tell where the revenge ended and the self-destruction began. What if he finds out before I'm ready? What if I can't stop once I start? What if destroying him leaves me with nothing but a hollowed-out soul? Then I'd remember that screenshot. I'd see the photo of him and Alina, smiling like the king and queen of New York. I'd remember that for 10 months he'd looked me in the eye and lied about his very existence. Every time I felt weak, the rage came back to claim the throne. A close call almost ended the game prematurely last Thursday. Julian showed up at my door 2 hours early, unannounced. I had his work laptop open on the kitchen island. I'd been busy copying client contact sheets and internal memos. I barely had time to slam the lid shut and switch to a tab on my own iPad showing a designer lingerie shop before he walked through the door. His eyes narrowed. He looked at the laptop, then at me. "What were you doing just now?" His voice had that sharp, interrogative edge he used on junior associates. I didn't blink. I didn't let my voice quiver. I walked straight over to him, wrapped my arms around his waist, and looked up at him with those wide, innocent eyes that I knew were his weakness. "I was just waiting for you, Julian. I was looking for something special to wear for you tonight because I missed you so much today." The distraction was a total success. His ego swallowed the lie whole. Within 30 seconds, he'd forgotten all about the laptop. But later that night, while he was in the shower, I had to grip the edge of the sink because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I was getting sloppy. The adrenaline high was making me reckless, and in this game, reckless gets you killed, or worse, it gets you sued. I knew I needed to slow down, but the clock wouldn't let me. The partnership vote was looming like a storm cloud. And Alina, she just posted another perfect photo on her private Instagram, the one I was monitoring from a burner account. They were planning a luxury ski trip to Aspen in 2 weeks. The exact same weekend Julian told me he'd be on a high-stakes business trip with me in the Caribbean. The contradictions were tearing me apart. I still felt that sick, familiar thrill when he called me his good girl. I still felt a surge of triumph when he chose my bed over his wife. But every time he closed that apartment door behind him, the hatred grew sharper, more refined. I decided it was time to escalate the financial side of the war. I started making small, calculated transfers from one of his discretionary, client entertainment accounts, the ones that rarely get audited, into a burner account I'd set up under a shell LLC. We're talking 5,000 here, 7,000 there. Nothing that would trigger a bank's fraud department immediately, but enough to create a pattern of suspicious activity if a forensic accountant ever got a tip. I also started documenting everything with clinical precision. Timestamps, screenshots of his GPS locations. I even started voice recording our pillow talk, the parts where he'd badmouth the firm's compliance officers or brag about how he massaged the numbers to make a deal look better than it was. I stored it all in a triple encrypted cloud folder. I even set up a dead man's switch. If I didn't log in for 48 hours, the entire folder would be automatically emailed to Alina, his firm's HR department, and the SEC. Paranoia wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was my business partner. Then came the night that changed the internal landscape of my heart. Julian was drunk, sentimental, messy drunk. He pulled me close on the velvet sofa, the very same spot where he'd once told me I was different from the others. His voice was thick with bourbon and self-pity. Sometimes, Clara, I wish I could just hit the reset button. I wish I could just start over with you and leave all the bullshit, all the expectations, all the lies behind. My heart actually clenched. For one terrifying, weak second, I almost believed him. I almost let the good girl win. I almost reached out to tell him I knew everything and that we could fix it. But then I saw the light catch his wedding ring, the one he always took off and put in his pocket the second he stepped inside my door. I didn't break. I stroked his cheek, looked deep into his eyes, and whispered, "Then why don't you, Julian? Why don't you just leave?" He let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "It's not that simple, baby. The money, the kids, the reputation, her father. It's a cage. A gold-plated cage, but a cage nonetheless." In that moment, any remaining shred of guilt I felt for what I was about to do died a cold, lonely death. He wasn't a victim of his life. He was a willing participant who just wanted to have his cake and eat it too. I kissed him softly, a kiss of betrayal. "I understand, Julian. I'll be right here as long as you need me." Later, while he slept off the booze, I took his primary phone. I forwarded the most damaging, incriminating thread of our entire 10-month relationship. Months of proof of his infidelity and financial gifts to a new anonymous account. I didn't send it. Not yet. I scheduled it to hit Alina's inbox at 9:00 a.m. on the Monday morning, exactly 1 week before his partnership vote. The trap was finally set. The steel jaws were open. Right now, as I type this, I'm still his good girl. I'm still sending the flirty photos. I'm still moaning his name when he needs to feel like a king. I'm still letting him fall asleep in my bed, believing he's the one in control of this narrative. But the clock is ticking down to 0. In less than 3 weeks, the perfect life Julian Vance built on a foundation of lies, and my body is going to start to collapse. His clients are going to pull their capital. The whispers in the halls of his firm are going to turn into a full-blown internal investigation. Alina is finally going to see the monster she married. And I'll be right here in this apartment he paid for, pretending to be shocked, offering him a shoulder to cry on while I watch him unravel in real time. I'll be the one collecting the pieces of my own power from the wreckage of his empire. He thought he was buying a secret. He didn't realize he was buying his own destruction. Stay tuned for the finale, because when this bomb goes off, there won't be enough left of Julian Vance to fill a briefcase. I was tricked into becoming the other woman. I was shoved into a role I never asked for, playing a character in a script I didn't write. But now I'm the one holding every single card in the deck, and Julian doesn't even realize the game has already ended. When the final domino falls, and it's falling right now, I won't even have to raise my voice. I won't have to scream. I won't have to make a scene. I'm just going to sit back and watch the physics of his own lies do the work for me. The week leading up to the partnership vote felt like walking a razor's edge while wearing nothing but silk lingerie. It was the most high-stakes performance of my life. Every single morning, I woke up with my stomach twisted into knots, so tight it felt like a physical weight. It was a cocktail of paralyzing fear and electric exhilaration, braided together so closely I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I'd stand in front of the marble vanity in the bathroom he paid for, staring at my reflection under the flattering designer lighting, asking myself the same haunting question: who the hell have I become? Then, like clockwork, the good morning text would buzz on my nightstand. Missing my good girl already, counting down the minutes until I can escape the office. Just like that, the mask would slide back on. My heart would go cold, and my thumbs would fly across the screen. I'd send him a tasteful mirror selfie, lips slightly parted, eyes softened with a fake, practiced devotion. Come over tonight, baby. I'll make you forget all about this stressful week. Because that's all I still was to him. I was his escape. I was his secret addiction, his little vacation from reality. I was his good girl. And I was about to become the worst nightmare he ever had the misfortune of dreaming. The final setup took place on a rainy Thursday night, the kind of New York rain that's gray, cold, and relentless. Julian arrived at my apartment soaked to the bone and absolutely furious. The merger deal, the one that was supposed to be his crowning achievement, was hanging by a single, frayed thread. One of the senior partners had started asking pointed, uncomfortable questions about personal conduct and reputation risk. Even worse for him, that big family office client had suddenly gone radio silent after receiving my little anonymous tip. He poured himself a triple scotch, his hand shaking slightly as the crystal decanter clinked against the glass. He collapsed onto my velvet couch, looking every bit of his 42 years. Everything's falling apart, Clara. I don't know what's happening. It's like someone is actively trying to sabotage me from the inside. I sat down beside him, wearing the silk robe he'd bought me for our 6-month anniversary. I draped my legs over his lap and began gently massaging his temples, feeling the pulse of his stress thrumming under my fingertips. Baby, just breathe, I whispered. I'm right here. I've got you. Whatever you need, I'm yours. He pulled me closer, burying his face into the crook of my neck, inhaling my perfume as if it were oxygen. You're the only real thing in my life right now, Clara. The only thing that isn't a lie. The irony of those words should have shattered what was left of my heart. Instead, they were like gasoline on the cold fire burning in my chest. I kissed him deeply, letting him lose himself in the physical sensation of me, while my mind was a digital clock, counting down the hours until the scheduled email, the one containing a year's worth of betrayal, would hit Alina's inbox. Later that night, while he slept the heavy, oblivious sleep of the exhausted, I slipped out of bed for the very last time. I opened the encrypted folder on my laptop and did one final audit. Exhibit A, 10 months of explicit, undeniable text threads. Exhibit B, PDF receipts for every hotel, every gift, and every flight. Exhibit C, voice recordings of him calling his wife, dead weight, and bragging about how he manipulated the firm's expense reports to pay for our lifestyle. Exhibit D, screenshots of the discretionary transfers I'd framed to look like his personal embezzlement. My finger hovered over the confirm button for the scheduled delivery. For 30 agonizing seconds, I froze. A wave of pure guilt crashed over me. His kids didn't deserve a broken home. Alina didn't deserve to have her dignity shredded in a public scandal. And a small, lonely, stupid part of me still loved the version of Julian that made me feel special. But then I remembered the screenshot. I remembered the 14 years of lies he'd told that woman. I remembered how he called me his real life, while keeping me hidden away like a dirty secret. I pressed send. The trap was live. That weekend was pure, unadulterated psychological warfare. Julian told me he was headed on a last-minute business trip to finalize the merger. In reality, I knew he was in Aspen with Alina and the kids, playing the role of the doting father for one last holiday. I spent those 48 hours refreshing my burner accounts, my heart racing every time my phone vibrated. The silence was a special kind of torture. I actually missed his voice. I hated myself for it, hated that I was mourning a man I was currently executing. I paced the apartment like a caged predator, caught between the urge to call it all off and the hunger to watch it burn brighter than the sun. On Sunday night, the silence finally broke. "Julian, this trip is a disaster. I can't stop thinking about you. I need you. Can I come straight to the apartment when I land tomorrow morning?" I replied instantly, my hands steady as a rock. "Clara, always, baby. I'll be waiting with open arms and nothing else." The performance had to be flawless now. We were in the end game. Monday was the day the world exploded. The partnership vote was set for 10:00 a.m. at exactly 9:17 a.m. My burner phone buzzed with a Google alert I'd set for his name. Headline: Vance and Associates partner Julian Vance faces misconduct allegations amidst major merger. The article was already viral in the finance world. Anonymous sources, leaked internal emails, questions about financial irregularities. I watched the firm's stock ticker take a sharp, jagged dip in pre-market trading. I smiled for the first time in weeks. It was a cold, sharp feeling. At 11:42 a.m. he called me. His voice was shaking, a sound I'd never heard from the invincible Julian Vance. "Clara, something is happening. The firm's someone is trying to destroy me. Alina, she got an email. I need to see you. I'm coming over now." I softened my voice into a purr of pure comfort. "Come over, Julian. I'll take care of you, just like I always do." When he arrived that evening, he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 hours. His tie was gone, his shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes were bloodshot. The Titan of Wall Street was cracking right in front of me. He grabbed me the second the door closed, his grip desperate and rough, like I was the only thing keeping him from spinning off the face of the earth. We didn't even make it to the bedroom. He took me right there, against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, whispering "good girl" like a frantic prayer while the lights of Manhattan, the city he no longer conquered, glittered behind us. Afterward, as we lay tangled together on the sofa, he finally broke. He told me Alina had seen the messages. He told me she was asking questions that he couldn't answer. He told me the firm had placed him on immediate administrative leave. The client had pulled out. The merger was dead. I stroked his hair, my heart, somehow still aching for the man, feeling like cast iron. "I'm so sorry, baby," I lied, the words tasting like copper and honey. "You don't deserve this." Then came the final blow. My hidden phone vibrated on silent. I checked it while he was in the kitchen pouring more scotch. Alina had posted a single story on her Instagram before deleting her entire digital presence. A black screen with simple white text. "Sometimes, the man you built your life with is just a stranger wearing a mask." She knew it was over. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in emotional contradiction. I stayed. I comforted Julian through every stage of his collapse. I held him while he cried about his career. I listened while he raged about the anonymous coward who had ruined him. I even helped him draft pathetic, pleading responses to the firm's legal team. Every night he fell asleep in my arms, believing I was his only safe harbor in a storm he didn't understand. And every night I lay awake feeling the crushing weight of what I'd done. The guilt ate at my stomach, but it was matched by a dark, intoxicating sense of power I'd never felt before. On our final night together, he looked at me with hollow, broken eyes. "If I lose everything, Clara, the money, the house, the name, would you still want me? Just us?" I kissed his forehead, a final benediction. "I'll always want the man I thought you were, Julian." That was the last time I saw him. The ending was quiet, exactly as I'd choreographed it. The firm forced him out to save their brand. Alina filed for a high-conflict divorce and froze every asset her father's lawyers could reach. The embezzlement trail I'd planted was just enough for the SEC to start a formal inquiry. His name became radioactive. I moved out of the apartment 48 hours after his termination. I left no forwarding address. I blocked his number. I vanished from his life as cleanly as a ghost. But I left one final message, an anonymous email sent from a public terminal in a library far from my new life. "You called me your good girl. I was never yours. Enjoy the life you built on lies. It looks like it fits you perfectly." It's been 6 months now. I used the relocation fund I'd built up from those tiny transfers to launch my own creative agency. It's small. It's mine. It was built with the cold, hard skills I sharpened while pretending to be a secret. Sometimes I still see his name in the "Where Are They Now?" sections of financial blogs. Former executive Julian Vance faces ongoing federal probe. Every time I see it, a wave of emotions hits me. Satisfaction, a lingering sadness, a prickle of pride, and a strange, quiet emptiness. I was tricked into being the other woman. I became the woman who dismantled a dynasty while calling him baby. And the scariest truth of all, the one I take to bed with me every night. I don't regret it, not for a single second. Because in the process of destroying Julian Vance, I finally found the woman I was meant to be.